Hello, everyone. This is Susan Zettel. I am the Quality Assurance Manager with 211 United Way. And this is training on our Quality Assurance program. And I am going to go through this in kind of a systematic way. I'd like to start with the actual form where calls are measured and scored, and then move on to the weights, you might say, of exactly what each one of the measures are, and then finally talk about our quality assurance monitoring plan or agreement, so to speak, and the sole purpose for the reason why we go through scoring and measuring calls and constantly trying to improve the service that we deliver to our communities. So let me get back here. And thanks to Tanisha, I just randomly picked one of our electronic. This is actually live. I could score this if I chose to. Calls, I could listen to it and score it at the same time, which is the process that we go through. Calls are looked at basically in three general areas. You see them over to the right here: communication, content, and procedure. So within communication, what we are looking for is an appropriate greeting, demonstrating active listening, establishing dialogue, demonstrating a willingness to help, using tone, pace, volume, and inflection throughout the call so that you show that willingness, so that you show kind, welcoming atmosphere, so to speak, within the call for your caller. Using correct grammar, pronunciation, enunciation, short, simple sentences whenever possible to make things clear for your caller. Inspiring confidence and trust, being polite and courteous, showing empathy throughout the call, avoiding slang, personal opinions, religious or political statements, which actually most of the time are brought up by our callers, but it's pretty important to be neutral. You don't really need to comment on them at all. Showing keeping your silence gaps to a very, very minimum length. We're looking at 10 seconds or less, keeping your caller engaged throughout the whole call, and also avoiding irrelevant conversation within the call, avoiding unnecessary interruptions or talking over your caller, and then also using our appropriate closing, which is our AIRS standard closing. We'll go into a little bit more detail on that, but I wanted to go through the form and the basic contents first so that you become familiar with it. You will have access to Xzam and the ability to listen to your monitored calls. Hear yourself. Once you get used to hearing your own voice on a recording, it becomes easier and easier. But you'll also see whether you were successful within one of these measures, whether you were not, or whether one of these measures just didn't apply within the call that you took and was chosen for monitoring. Also, monitoring when we choose a call is strictly at random. So communication is probably the most important piece of what we measure. And then right up there in importance, certainly not a whole lot less, is the content that we deliver out based on our database to our callers. So the first thing we're looking for is, do you explain the reason why you're asking questions? So your explained reason provides context for asking demographic and any other questions that you might. It puts your caller very much at ease when we explain why we need to ask those questions. Giving context for the referral before providing. You probably just noticed on your screen that when I hover over this, it gives me more detail. This one actually gives me an example. And it states, okay, I have 2 programs that offer help paying your electric bill. The first is this one. That is kind of what we refer to as teeing up or giving context to the referrals before you begin. Another nice technique is to say, oh, I've got several options on my screen. Let's begin with this one. It just kind of packages what you have to deliver to your caller. Avoided or explained acronyms. In the world that we live in, we get very used to referring as the Home Energy Assistance Program as HEAP, PIP, you know, some of the other acronyms that we come up with. We want to always say those out to our callers. When we don't, we run the risk of them not understanding what we're talking about. Resources and information provided is correct, matches callers' need is an important thing that is measured within the call. Did you pick those right resources? Did they match what your caller's need was? Maybe not what their request was, but what their underlying need was. Provided appropriate level of detail on resource offered. Provided key resources. In other words, we didn't omit something that would have been important to that caller. Provided resource information based on content, not personal opinion or knowledge. We want to stay away from that. We always want to stay neutral. Confirms callers' understanding of the resource provided. That kind of gets their buy-in. Yes, that can help. Yes, that's close to me. I'll try that. It's kind of the feedback we're looking for from our callers, but confirming their understanding is an important piece before we let them go. Caller has a clear plan to move forward, and we offered a follow-up call if it's applicable to whatever their need was, and Chris will train you guys later on what our follow-up policy is. Then our final measure that we're looking at when we're looking at the quality of a call is the procedure that were followed. Did we use our mute button so that we weren't coughing or sneezing into the microphone, so that someone coming up behind us asking us a question isn't overheard, as well as our reply isn't overheard. That's what our mute button's for. It's there, and it's really a good idea. Sometimes it can be one of your best friends within a call. Specialist uses proper hold procedures. Specialist uses proper reskill or transfer procedures. Seeks assistance from a supervisor in a timely manner. Appropriately gathers customer demographic for assistance. Specialist completes a transmittal when needed. Specialist correctly records demographics and information in refer. So we've got procedure, content, and communication that all add up to a total score when the quality assurance team is scoring a particular interaction, whether it be a chat or a call that a specialist has taken. Let's take a look in a little bit more detail, not just hovering here because it only stays available for a few seconds, at the detail page that you will receive a copy of that goes into further explanation of what we're looking for when it comes to communication, content, and procedure. You're also going to see on here the most available points that are available to you if you achieve success in one of these measures, okay? So our greeting is worth 5 points. We're looking for 3 particular things. That you thanked your caller, you mentioned 211, you offered your name and the offer to help them. That coincides very closely with what the AIRS standard is. So using an appropriate greeting, does it harm your caller when you don't? No, not very much. And it's only worth 5 points to you when you don't achieve all of those within your greeting. You always want to go for it because it's the AIRS standards. You want to strive for the best, but it's only worth 5 points. It doesn't have a whole lot of impact on your caller if you simply say, hello, this is Susan. You're still going to get into the nitty-gritty of assessing what their need is, which is worth more, and giving them good referrals, which is worth more than just 5 points. So I'm trying to give you a little perspective here on what the available points and what kind of ranks something as being important within a call really boils down to the impact that that has on our customer when they hang up and go to take the next step in what they need to do to receive services. So our next measure in communication is demonstrates active listening throughout the call. You can see here that responded appropriately to client statements, used minimal encouragers, I understand. Sometimes you just say, okay. Oftentimes, paraphrasing is a great tool that we can use, and also helping our caller prioritize here in terms of, oh, okay, it sounds like you need both clothing and food. Let's deal with the food first. We may find some places that have both. So helping your caller and establishing that active listening, that rapport, is worth 10 points. Rapport kind of bleeds in here with the third measure for established dialogue and asked correct questions to determine your caller's or your client's need. You want to always try and ask open-ended, certainly not multiple choice, or close-ended yes or no's. The close-ended yes or no's are used more for clarity. Allowing your caller to open up a conversation with you is what you're going for here when you establish dialogue and rapport. It lets you get at more of the need and focus a little bit more on what's going to help them to a greater degree than simply the request that they asked for. We often see calls break down in this area and score fairly low because the caller wasn't allowed to establish exactly what their situation is and what their need is. That the call specialist simply dealt with the request for food and didn't delve any deeper, request for rent and didn't delve into exactly where they are in the rent process, exactly what have they tried so far, those kinds of things. Opening up that conversation is critical to the success of your call. It's critical to the success that your caller will have when they move forward. And it's also a critical point when we sit down to score a call. One of the more important things that we're looking for is that in-depth assessment of the caller's need, and not just taking it for granted that, oh, they know what they need, they know what they requested, here you go, here's the phone number. So to move on, demonstrated a willingness to help is worth 15 points, and with that, you want to use encouraging words. Yes, I can look for that for you. Hopefully we'll be able to find that in our community. Let's take a look. May I ask a few more questions? Those kinds of things. You're demonstrating a willingness to help. Used appropriate tone, pace, volume, and inflection throughout your contact with your caller. You want to be personable. You want to be warm. You don't ever want to rush them, and you don't ever want to take on any kind of negative or degrading tone. You want to keep a pace that equals the pace of your caller. If they happen to be somebody who speaks slowly, you want to slow yourself down. If they happen to be in an agitated state, you want to deepen your voice. You want to lower your voice. You want to slow your voice down in the hopes to bring their agitation down a little bit. those kinds of communications techniques that we want to see you using are all worth 15 points each. Used correct grammar, pronunciation, enunciation. This doesn't affect your caller a whole lot. It's a really good customer service delivery thing to do, but it's worth 5 points. Inspired confidence and trust. You know, you avoided saying, gee, I'm not sure. Gosh, I've never dealt with anything like that before. You want to inspire trust in your caller. You want them to be confident in the information that you're delivering to them. If they're not, does it affect them going forward? Not too much. It's only worth 5 points. I hope I'm getting my point across. I think I'll stop now. But I am going to quickly continue to review what we mean by these particular measures. Was polite and courteous, used please, thank you, offered an apology when you didn't quite hear what your caller said, needed them to repeat something, showed empathy throughout the call, related to your caller in an understanding way. You acknowledged their feelings. Sounds like this has been hard for you. Oh, I'm sorry you're having to deal with that. Let's see what resources we can find. Those kinds of things is what we're looking for when we're looking for words of empathy. Avoided slang, personal opinion, religious or political statements. Avoided offering advice to your caller, personal opinion. Oftentimes callers ask us, you want to say, gee, I've given you a couple of options, try them all. See which one you feel most comfortable with. You want to maintain that objectivity. Controlled silence gaps. We're looking for staying in touch with your caller verbally every 10 seconds. Saying things like, okay, right now I'm going to move on and see what I can find here. Is 5 miles away too far for you? Do you have transportation? You know, asking some of those little questions that will help you understand a little bit more about their situation, but at the same time avoiding small talk, things that don't really matter within the conversation, but you do want to stay in and keep them engaged without anything of a silence gap longer than 10 seconds. Avoided unnecessary interruptions or talking over callers. You want to offer an apology when you need to kindly interrupt and get them back on track. You want to thank your caller whenever it's appropriate when they've done something within the call that's helpful to you, like giving you their zip code and their age and things like that. So that sums up communication. It is the single out of the 3 most heavily weighted at 120 points altogether within one single call. Not far behind, however, is content, which is worth 110 points altogether. And here we're looking for you to establish a reason with your caller, either asking them permission to ask more questions or stating, gee, it would help me to know a little bit more about the situation if I knew such and such. So you want to explain the reason why you're asking certain questions to your caller, like the demographics. May I have your zip code and age to find something that you will qualify for in our database? We try and help you guys with a script on this one, which Chris will review with you. But once again, we are looking to give our caller a reason. It puts them at ease to know the reason why we're asking certain questions. I'm sure everybody has heard that callers say, age, why do you need my age? Well, if you tell them up front why you need their age, they're comfortable with it. They have an understanding of why we ask that question. Gives context for referral before providing. We kind of refer to this as teeing it up, like when you're about to tee up a golf swing. and saying something along the lines of, it looks like I have 2 programs that you might qualify for. Let's talk about these. Before you get into it, you kind of package that for your caller. Avoided or explained acronyms. ESOP is one of our well referred to agencies here in Cuyahoga County. It refers to empowering and strengthening Ohio's people. And what we're looking for you to do is not use those abbreviations that we become very familiar with, not use typical social service jargon. Oh, what about case management? Have you thought about case management? You need to think about what case management means to your caller. Most people would not know what that means. So we're looking for folks to avoid that kind of conversation. Resources and/or information provided was correct and matched your caller's need. You'll see this is worth 15 points. It would have huge impact if we were trying to send somebody to a food pantry that was 25 miles away from them, right? That's pretty simply. Provided appropriate level of detail on resources offered. Our researchers, content experts, put a lot of time and effort into contacting folks and vetting exactly what they give us to deliver. It is worth it to our caller to explain every minute detail as much as we possibly can to our callers to empower them with all of the information to take that second step. So we want to always stick to a good level of detail, keeping in mind that your caller needs this information to be able to follow through. Key resources, another one worth 15 points. We don't want to omit anything that could be helpful for that caller's success. Provides resource information based on content, not personal information. We all kind of know little personal things about agencies and what they do and how they do it. We want to stick to strictly the information that's available in our database. When we do discover something, we want to make sure that our researchers know that, and they can decide with that agency whether it should be in our database to share with the public. Confirms content, understanding of resources provided. Confirms your client's understanding of resources provided. Always wanting to check back with your caller. When you're delivering that resource from your service site page, it should be a back and forth conversation. Oh, I see. In order to qualify for this, you need to be this, this, and this. Do you have those documents? You know, always that back and forth conversation leads to the success of communicating with your caller and giving them the right referrals and getting the full 10 points in that area. Your caller wants to walk away from their interaction with you with a clear plan of what their next step is going to be and how they're going to be able to follow through. That's worth 10 points. We want to make sure we lay that out for them clearly and they understand that. Offers a follow-up. Once again, you guys aren't yet familiar with our follow-up policy, but you'll see there are some endangerment and safety kind of issues where we're looking for folks to schedule a follow-up. Sometimes it's also necessary to schedule a follow-up after you send a transmittal and let researchers research something for you. So that's kind of what we're looking for there. However, I will say that 90, maybe 95% of calls end up with a not applicable in the follow-up area. Now, to move from our content into procedure, give a little bit more clarity to what we're looking for here. The first is demonstrated proper use of your mute button. You know, you don't want to be impolite and talk over someone. You don't want to have a side conversation that they might be overhearing, or coughing or sneezing, that kind of thing. Clearing your throat is probably what I hear most often. So get familiar with your mute button because your caller will never know that you used it and that you needed to sneeze or cough or clear your throat, or even talk to your neighbor. Also in the procedure area, followed proper hold procedures. Placed your caller on hold, asked them permission first to do so, thanked them when you came back, and checked back with them every 60 seconds, if at all possible. Followed proper reskill and transfer. Warm transfers whenever appropriate. Used correct skill when you needed to reskill someone who ended up pressing the wrong button when they were in the queue, first coming into the queue. You don't disconnect, or you don't transfer your person right back in to wait in line for another call specialist again. So that just takes practice, and you guys in a short time will be experts at it. Sought assistance from a supervisor in a timely manner. This also has to do with knowing when you've run into a situation where you're going to need your supervisor's help. And when working in Cuyahoga County initially, I would assume is going to be pretty regularly. It's really important, and it impacts your caller. If you haven't, overturned every possible stone that you could possibly have to uncover resources for them, and your supervisor is often one of those things that you can turn to, especially with unmet needs. Don't assume that an unmet need in one community is also an unmet need in another community. Check with your supervisor first. You'll learn something, as well as be serving your client to the most possible degree. And that's why it's worth 15 points. Appropriately gathered customer demographic information asks and confirms zip code, age, and other pertinent information so that it's accurate. Completed a transmittal when needed, or recognizes when a transmittal is needed and submits it according to protocol. When you run into something that doesn't make sense to you, something that you think should be there, something that you can't find, scheduling a follow-up and sending a transmittal is one way to deal with it, or popping your caller on hold and checking with a supervisor is another way to deal. But we want to try and keep our database as fluid, vibrant, and up-to-date as we possibly can. We have become well known for its accuracy and depth, and part of that is because we're all active in getting it updated and submitting transmittals and being active in our communities and making sure that we have all of that information for our callers right at our fingertips. And then finally, correctly recorded demographics and other information in ReferNet. And that includes referral and non-referral actions according to protocol. And it's huge. It's worth 15 points. Why? Because this is the kind of information that gets reported out to our communities when people want to know where the gaps are in services, who's doing what, how effective have we been at, providing school uniforms for children, whatever. This is what many of our contracts consist of, is the reports that we can provide them on how effective we're being in fighting some of the, poverty and the struggles that our communities are having. If we haven't entered that data properly, our researchers can't pull it out of there correctly and give reports that are accurate to our community. So that's the reason why it's worth 15 points. We want to always make sure that we're recording our interactions as accurate and thoroughly as possible. Okay, now I'd like to go to our actual monitor monitoring plan, which we're going to ask everyone to agree to. We consider, and so does AIRS, human interaction as the prime service element in a health center and the way that it delivers service. Whether someone's engagement with 211 starts with a phone call, a chat, a text, or in-person assistance, the goal is to end with the discovery of new information, the resolution of a problem, hopefully, and lasting improvement to that person's life. This is one of the reasons why we stress so much the assessment at the start of the call. Sure, it's important to get a zip code and an age to open up your database and begin a search, but completely understanding that situation is what allows us to have that impact on our caller. Not just accepting the fact that they requested a certain service out of our database or a certain phone number, really defining what that means to them and making sure that that's going to have that improved effect on their life is what separates us from the 411s and the 311s in the world that we live in. So that human interaction is really key, and it's the reason why it's the first two words in our monitoring plan. United Way 211 will monitor and record calls and other media interactions for quality assistance purposes to continually increase the quality of our service and provide feedback and training to our community resource navigation specialists. That's you guys. We want to constantly and continuously help you do better and better and better when we serve our community and our individual callers or chatters. Customer results are measured in 3 focus areas: communication content and procedure, which we just basically went over twice, to ensure every customer receives empathy, professional assessment, accurate information, and a plan to move forward, and to check that referral and demographic data are recorded correctly for later reporting. To this end, a certain number of contacts per specialist will be monitored and scored on a monthly basis. Scoring will be conducted through a quality assurance management system through which results will be available for review by 211 specialists. 211 will also provide specialists regular opportunities for one-on-one coaching, internal monitoring, scoring procedures will undergo regular calibration to ensure uniformity and effectiveness of our quality assurance practices. So once again, we have a brief overview of communication and what we're looking for and the reason why it's so important in the quality assurance process, and it is to assure active listening, to make sure we're being empathetic, we're having a conversation to establish rapport, as well as get a complete picture of what those needs are with our callers. Often they don't come right out and state them, and it is our job to make sure we see the full situation, the full underlying need, and deliver more than just the request often. So to demonstrate customer care and concern, as well as active problem solving, to communicate confidentially, politely, and effectively in order to establish and inspire trust in 211 as well as United Way, to provide and promote consistency in the technique, language, and general service delivery among 211 specialists, so that we're all on the same page, communicating the same way and the same message to our callers. Content, I'm going to go through once again just very briefly. Appropriately match each customer's established need with key resources. Provide full detail only from our database. Express referral detail with structure and content. We don't want to be jumping all over the place. We want to ensure our callers' understanding by delivering it in a systematic way. To confirm that the customer has a clear path to move forward and that they've agreed that, hey, yeah, this is going to help me. We don't want to be moving off in a direction that they may never follow through on because we weren't on the same page. And to recognize the need for follow-up, escalation, and advocacy in certain complicated situations and endangerment. And then procedure kind of speaks for itself. We want to be accurate, and I think that will happen over time. So we're going to monitor a certain number of calls. We're going to vary the length of those calls and the type of the calls, the different time of the day, beginning for your shifts, end for your shifts, and middle of the shift, that kind of thing, so that I'm not, Nadine and I aren't always hitting you first thing on a Monday morning. Scoring should be uniform. It's done by grading, and you can request on your own to have us look at a call that maybe was puzzling or that you thought you did exceptionally well and give you feedback on that. But we will score a certain number agreed upon each month. And you will have 2 half-hour time slots scheduled for you to listen yourself within that Xzam software. And you can go ahead and contact your supervisor to dispute or get full clarity on those calls that were monitored each month. There's also a customer satisfaction piece where your caller is asked to take a brief survey on their experience. And then your coaching will be provided on a quarterly basis, as well as every D or F. The quality assurance team listens to 3 more calls when you score low like that, just to make sure there isn't a big thing going on that needs to be corrected immediately. But for the most part, you will receive a mandatory coaching session that oftentimes only lasts about 15 minutes or so for each D or F when and if that ever occurs. And that's just to ensure that we are working on that constant improvement so that our service delivery continues to get better and better. We meet twice a month to calibrate calls to make sure we're on the same page. We make sure all this stuff is confidential. And you guys will all receive the forms that we reviewed. We will ask you to sign your quality assurance monitoring agreement. And we might go through it in more detail if you would like at another time also. But for now, I think we're pretty much finished with our training. I hope it was beneficial for you and gets you a full understanding of what we do and why we do this, which is mainly for your continued professional improvement so that our customers can benefit from your professionalism as it develops and grows here with us at United Way 211. Thank you, everyone.